Hello and welcome to another episode of Crushing Comics, the show where I fall in love with my comic book collection all over again. I've got a big one this week. I think it is probably an absolute, but we've known me to be wrong in the past. And as I unwrap this, you know, it's the new year, and I was thinking about a new year and old friends. I don't know how old some of you are. I've talked to some of you in the comments, and some of you are around my age or a little bit older, and some of you must be much younger. And so I think it's interesting because some of you are from the Facebook era and MySpace and all that, and some of you aren't. And it made me think about keeping in touch with old friends and how that's changed for all of us as time has gone on. So for me, it's very much like two distinct eras. It's my friends from before Facebook who I probably didn't keep in touch with very well at all unless I was physically in proximity to them. And then like in a post-Facebook world, had to hunt them down and probably like never got the friendship back to the point that it was. And then there's the post-Facebook people, which even if I don't see them all the time, I've kept very good tabs on. Some of whom I've been keeping tabs on. I mean, I got Facebook, I think the first year it was available at my college, which was 2005. And so some of these people I've been connected to for 13 years on Facebook. And it's really changed the nature of connection for me. Even though I'm a big communications person and I had my blog even before there was Facebook, I was never good at keeping in touch with people. Like I tried to keep in touch with grade school friends and failed, and then tried to keep in touch with high school friends that didn't go to college with me and really only like kept in touch with one. And it really changed the nature of that. And so I think the interesting thing that it does is it's really expanded who we think of as our known universe of friends in our mind. And there's this research that said you can only really keep a certain amount of people. It has a certain number, which I didn't look up. It's either like 120 or 150 people kind of in your short-term memory of like, these are the people that I actively care about. And it's an interesting study in like organizational dynamics. If you're in a big company, like you're not going to be able to know everybody in the big company. You're going to know this immediately surrounding group of people. And Facebook's kind of distorted that because there's people that probably would like age out of that short-term group of people that you care the most about, and yet there they are, you're seeing their pictures of their kids in their house, and you haven't like seen them in person in years and years, and then sometimes one of them out of the blue writes you this like deep personal message. So I don't know where I was going with that. I was just thinking about the nature of it, and like how every year I start to wonder, like, I wonder if I should get in touch with XYZ person, especially now that I'm physically removed from all of them, right? Like there's probably a chance I'm not going to see any of them in person this year. So now I really have to make some decisions about who I'm going to keep in touch with, because it's not like I'm just going to run into them on the bus. Ooh. Okay. This is the first Sandman Absolute edition. And actually now I can resolve an open plot thread from an older video by showing you the thread, or the spine of Volume 2 versus the spine of Volume 1. So here's Volume 1 that we just opened. Notice its round spine. Do you see the spine is kind of rounded? It's a little bit rounded. Here's Volume 2. The spine is super, super flat. You could lay it down flat. You can't see it as much laid down, but you can see them side by side maybe. But this one is just like a little bit more rounded. So as we go over this today, you'll find that the spine here of number 2, or the spine, I'm sorry, of number 1, is just a much better spine. It's much more flexible. The binding's better too, just from that weird print run of 2. Okay. So I actually happen to have started reading Sandman, and I've read this whole Absolute, but it was a few years ago when I first got it, and so now I've been rereading it. And I think there's a lot of things that over time and space that we have forgotten about Sandman. One of which is Neil Gaiman. I don't think we forgot Neil Gaiman. I think we forgot who Neil Gaiman was when Sandman debuted. He wasn't really anybody of great note to the majority of comic reading audiences. He had been a journalist. He had written biographies. He wrote Don't Panic, the biography of Douglas Adams as well as of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and probably a lot of nerds knew him from that. I've read that book many, many times. He had written a biography of a band, like Depeche Mode, or I don't know, one of those new wave bands. I'll fix it in the Chiron if it wasn't Depeche Mode. But he wasn't a comics writer, and DC gave him this property not with the advanced knowledge that it was going to go on to be this like force in literature, comics as literature. He just was writing a series that maybe wasn't even meant to be really long-lived, and probably at the time, the person that people were more excited about in the series was Sam Keith as the artist more than Neil Gaiman. So that's, first of all, you have to get that set in your mind. Like, there was no Neil Gaiman, the man, the myth, the legend that started this series. The other thing I really think people forget about this is that it was a horror comic. It was scary. It had, you know, the first issue is this very suspenseful thing about this creature that's being kept in the basement, and they tried to capture Death, but they didn't. Instead, they captured Dream. But we're seeing it from the perspective of this kind of like sorcerer society as they age, and all these people who are cursed with a dreaming sickness around the world that are aging, and it's like really creepy and scary. And even as we get Dream as a character, and he's looking for his three sources of power, his ruby, his helmet, and his bag of sand, he's not hugely sympathetic, and he's kind of a little creepy, and we don't know if we like him or we can trust him or what it's going to mean for him to get his powers back. And, you know, to get the, which thing does he get where? To get his helmet back, he's got to go to hell. To get his bag of sand back, he has to go with Constantine, Hellblazer, to the house of this woman that's been taken over by dreams made real. It's seriously, seriously weird and creepy stuff. And the other thing that I think people forget is that this was very much tied into the DC universe at the time. There's an issue where he walks into the Justice League International headquarters and wakes up scot-free Mr. Miracle from a dream, and then they run into Martian Manhunter. Like, this was not this Vertigo title that was so divorced. By the end, in the 4th volume at his funeral, there's kind of this like winking joke that there's superheroes that are mourning him and they don't know why. But that wouldn't be the case here because the superheroes know him. So it's I think we've forgotten a lot of things about Sandman, and I think that we forget also, maybe nobody forgot, but I forgot this, both as somebody who read it and as somebody who has perceptions, preconceptions about this run. The other thing was that it was very brisk at first. Like, we ease into this idea of Gaiman writing these very, like, novella kind of long-running arcs, because at the beginning, each issue, something happens. And I think that's a sign, like, nobody knew this was going to be a hit. Nobody knew it was going to be a long-running comic book. And so Gaiman's just trying to get Death his stuff back. There was no guarantee that it was going to last more than like 12 or 18 issues. So if this was created today, there's no way that he would get all of his stuff back within the first 8 issues. I found myself amazed that the issue where he goes to hell and has the contest with one of the demons that's very reminiscent of the contest, the wizard stool in Disney's Sword in the Stone that Merlin goes through with the evil witch. That I couldn't believe it all happened in one issue. I was even in my head, I'm like, this is going to be a couple issue arc. Today it would be like a 6-issue arc. And then the thing with Constantine for the pouch would be 6 issues. Finally, there's like actually a cliffhanger when he's trying to get his, the ruby back. And I'm like, wow, this one's going to last for 2 issues. So it's much, much faster than you imagine here at the start. The other thing is, I think, if you've never read it and all you know are these beautiful designs by Dave McKean that are on the covers, and here's the cover of the first issue of Sandman. They're beautiful, like, photo collages, and he along with like David Mack are 2 real masters of these kind of like weird dreamlike compositions, that you might forget that the internal art was not like that at this point. Later in the series, the interior art really starts to get a little bit more beautiful and starts to match that kind of dreamy quality of the covers. And I think that tends to be when it's like Charles Vess or Colleen Duran or doing the internal art. But the big Sam Keith's art was like jagged. I mean, if you look at this first issue, it's not bad. And this is recolored, which is the last topic I'll cover. It's not bad art by any means. It's actually quite cool, but it's not even Sam Keith in his Ghost Rider phase, which is just a couple of years after this, or even the Max. Like, his stuff is still like a little creepy and saggy and weird, and that's fine. It's a great fit for what Gaiman is doing, but like, don't think that this book is the covers. It's really nothing like the covers. So the final thing is recoloring. Now, you have probably at this point heard me come out against modern recoloring of books. I don't like it. I think it's revisionist history that you should only really do at the point that you have to have made a change to the art file because you don't have the original art anymore. However, I have actually noticed, and I didn't know this before, that this has recoloring on some of the earlier issues that's pretty serious. It's not minor. It's at least as major as the recoloring in the Simonson Thor omnibus, if not more. And here's the thing that always bothers me. It gets rid of the vividness at the time. And I know it's because you couldn't do things like a cloudy gray sky with people that had kind of pale faces in front of it, because you would lose the definition of it. So you made the sky pink so that you could still make the faces that color. You couldn't put people in front of a fireplace and have the fire reflect on their faces because they would just look red. So you kind of just cast the whole scene in a wash of color that was meant to imply they're in front of the fireplace instead of detailing the actual light on them. And all that's been changed. And I do think that the original pages are much more gorgeous. And there are a set of hardcovers that do have the original coloring, but they are very, very hard to track down. If I was still in the States and I had my time to expend on it, I might start eBay searching for them just to have those to compare with this side by side, but I don't. So, I actually, paradoxically, really wanted to start reading this in the new year, and so I actually picked up the first few issues digitally, which I thought would be cool to like really be able to like zoom in and look at the art, because I didn't know when I would be opening the book. And so now that I've opened the book, now I'm like on issue 6 or 7, and now I can switch to reading it in the book. What a tangled web we weave when we have a comic book collection of 25,000 physical comic books. So this is the official shelving of Sandman Absolute Volume 1. We're just going to slide it up there where I took Volume 2 off the shelf, and I'll put that back later. Thank you so much for tuning into another issue of Crushing Comics. I'm so happy that I got to open that one with you today. Please continue to tune in as there are more books to unwrap and fall in love with. Thank you so much for watching. It's a post-credit scene. If you really want to talk more about Sandman, tune in for my special live broadcast tomorrow where I'm going to be doing a Sandman Reading Club of the first portion of that Sandman Absolute. So if you like the topic of today and you've never read Sandman, or you want to read Sandman, or you're in the process of reading Sandman, or if you've read Sandman before and you'd like to talk about it, tune in and I will do just that, not in the way that I talk about things on the wall where I kind of just get into what I can remember from a long ago read as I'm surprised by opening them, but an actual discussion of the issues in the comic book. So tune in for that.